there, everyone. Welcome to our third video for our Mexican embroidery stitch project. We're going to wrap up this project tonight, and we'll start something new next time. We're going to do 3 stitches tonight. 2 of them are traditional Mexican stitches. The third one is a little bonus stitch because it's super handy, and it's useful for just knowing for all embroidery. If I know some of you are getting into this, so if you're doing kits or anything, you're going to need it. So we're going to start with a stitch that will be for the little flowers, the little leaves on your flower stem. So if you did this one, here are your leaves. If you did this one, here are your leaves. And then again, here are your leaves on this one. Our second stitch is going to be how to do fun little circles. So here are your circles for this one. On this one, you've got the center of your flowers and the little circles on your butterfly. And then on this one, you just have the one circle. But this is a really fun stitch for all of those. Again, very widely used in embroidery worldwide. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch over to the overhead camera. All right, here we go. So the first one, like I said, is for those little leaves, and it is called the Kankalas stitch. And if you've done embroidery before, you know it is the lazy daisy. So if you've got your stem with your little leaves on it, you're going to work very small on those little leaves. I'm going to work a little bigger just so that you can see what I'm doing here. So let's just say here's one of my little leaves. Okay. And I'm going to draw this on here too, because you can also do it with an open, it doesn't have to be like this raindrop shape. It can have an open space at the end. So here's my stem. So the Kankalas stitch or lazy daisy. Now I am going to use for this leaf, and I would recommend that you use for your leaves a double thread of, so all 6 threads times 2 knotted at the end. Depending on how many leaves you have, you probably don't need to go all the way like fingertip to shoulder with this. Probably fingertip to bicep is more than enough. This stitch, you don't always have to use a double thread, but in the Mexican embroidery tradition, you want this to be very full and poofy, and so the more thread, the better. So what I'm going to do for this Kankalas stitch, the lazy daisy, is I'm going to start back here at the point of my leaf or petal shape. And I'm going to come up from the bottom. Okay. I'm going to check my knot because I always check my knot. Now I'm going to go back in the same hole or right next to the same hole that I came out of. And remember, that just depends on the sort of the width of the weave of your fabric, whether or not you can go right in the same hole, but right next to it's fine. And I'm going to go through, but I'm not going to pull this all the way down. I'm going to kind of loop this over the shape of my leaf, and then I'm going to come up right here at the end of my shape. And I'm coming through the loop of my thread. And then when I pull this, I'm going to make sure that I'm pulling on both threads. I don't want to just pull on one, because it'll only tighten one of my loop. This is going to tighten around where my thread came up. Okay. And for the Mexican style of this stitch, I want this to be pretty loosey-goosey. Like I really want to be able to get my needle under here and have space under my thread. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back down pretty much where I came out. All I'm going to be doing here is tacking down the loop. I'm going to make this tiny tacking stitch. And I'm going to pull taut. Now you want to be careful here because I want to keep this loop that I just made loosey-goosey. Carefully pull that down. Now that I've pulled this little tacking stitch tight, this is in place. I'm good. I don't have to worry so much about my tension. Now I can leave this like this and have it as a loop, but because we're working on these fill stitches, if we were working in the Mexican tradition, this is actually chamula embroidery, which we've worked on before, we want to fill this in. So because you have a small petal that's about half this size, you're only going to need one fill stitch in here. I'm probably going to need more than one. That's okay. You can fill whatever you need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up and see here. I'm not coming up through the same hole, but I'm coming in just above it. And traditionally what I would do is just do a little straight stitch in here. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go in again, right behind where I came up before. And again, I'm leaving this pretty loosey-goosey. Okay. And then I'm going to knot off. If I was doing a bunch of these right next to each other, if I was making a flower and this was the petals, I would just keep going because I'm going to jump over here to another one. I'm going to knot off, and I recommend that you do the same. Just because that's going to be a lot of extra thread on the back, which can make things tricky. So just a quick review. I'm just going under the nearest stitch, looping back through. Now, because this stitch, the way it looks, relies on the looseness of the tension, I want to be very, very careful when I'm knotting this off because I don't want to tighten this over here. So I'm just going to be very careful. I can even sort of hold on to this a little bit while I pull. Okay, so I've knotted that off. And now what I'm going to do to finish it up is I'm going to take my needle end and I'm going to sort of fluff up. I'm going to separate these 12 threads and try to make this real poofy. So it really fills in the space. And use the tip of my embroidery scissors, whatever you've got, to sort of separate those. Okay, and so that's it. That's the Kankalas stitch. I'm going to do another one where I use this open shape instead of the teardrop shape. It's the exact same method, except for the very first part. So I've re-knotted the back of my double thread. Now, if I was doing this method, I would go back in the same hole. But for the open method, I'm going to go over here and go in to the other side. And then I'm going to pull my needle through. I'm going to come up at the end of that shape. Okay. And I'm going to tack this down. Okay, and that is it. That is the Lazy Daisy. So I'm gonna do I'm gonna show you what I like to call the pro move. I'm gonna do that over here. I'm gonna do one more closed petal. And I'm gonna show you the quick way to do this. I'm not gonna knot off for this. I'm gonna come, oops, I'm gonna come up at the base, the narrow part. I'm gonna go back down. Now, instead of putting my needle all the way through the fabric and then coming back up, oops, my video froze. I'm going to give that a second. Okay. Instead of pushing my needle all the way through the fabric, pulling it through, and then coming back up in one move, I'm going to do this again because of the frozen video. I'm going to put my needle in, and I'm going to, the same movement, I'm going to push it back out of the fabric at the end here. I'm going to slip my thread behind it so that I'm coming through the loop. And that's that. So if you're doing a bunch of these, that's a way to quicken it up a little bit. And that's that. Then I'll knot that off on the back. And that's it. That's the Kankalas stitch. It's really useful for any kind of flower embroidery with that leaf petal formation. Okay, so the next stitch that we're going to do is the eek stitch. That's ICH. And for this, it's worked in a circle. You might know it as the buttonhole stitch or the wheel stitch. I'm going to use the lid to my glue stick here to draw a circle. You've already got yours drawn. And I'm going to work quite large with this so that you can see what I'm doing. But you can work this on a circle of really any size. I mean, you don't want to work it on a dot. That's what our next stitch is for. But you can work it on any size circle. So what you want to do is inside your circles that you have drawn is you want to find the center point. And you can either work this stitch from a center point, or you can work, I'm going to draw another one over here. You can have an open center. So if you want fabric to show through, maybe you're doing a flower and you want to be able to put something else in here, one of our other fill stitches, you can leave this open. We're going to work on a dot to start. So for this one, I am working with a single thread. You can see my tail here. And I did go all the way, this one, it doesn't use a ton of thread, but I did go fingertip to shoulder and I did not my thread. So the thing to remember with this eek stitch or buttonhole stitch is that your thread is always going to be coming up on the circumference or perimeter of your circle, and it's always going to be going into the fabric on the dot or on your inner circle. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick a point on the outer circle. We're always going to come up on the outer circle. Here we go. We're going to come up on the outer circle. I'm going to go over this one a few times because it's a little bit tricky to get the hang of. All right. I've come up on the outer circle, checked my knot. Now I'm going to go in on the inner circle. Okay, this stitch, like I said, is also called the wheel stitch, and you're going to see why. It's like a wheel with spokes that come out. So if you like to, you feel more comfortable, you can draw where you want your spokes to be, or you can just eyeball it. All right. So, oops. Well, also, I won't go right to the pro move. All right. Let me get it together. Whew. Okay, I came out on the circumference. I'm going down in the center. Okay, and this is another one where we're going to sort of rely on tension and pulling this through a loop. So I'm not going to pull this all the way through. Now, I'm going to come back out on the circumference at the end of this first spoke. I'm going to go through the loop of my thread. And again, I'm going to pull this tight, just like we did with that lazy daisy stitch. Okay, and that is my first stitch of this eek stitch. Okay, now I'm working from the center. I'm going back in that same hole. I'm going to do this again the regular way. Okay, I'm going to find the end of my spoke on the circumference, coming up, and I'm through the loop. You'll notice that I've come through the loop here. And I'm going to pull that tight. All right, I'm going to do the pro move here. So I'm going down into that same hole. I'm going to come up on the circumference of my circle in one move, just like I did over here with this one. And again, because I haven't formed a loop yet, I just run my thread behind my needle. And pull. Okay, one more time. Now, let's say that I'm about to run out of thread. What I can do, I'm only halfway through my circle. I'm only a quarter of the way through my circle, and I'm running out of thread. I'm going to tack down, just like I did with the lazy daisy. I'm going to tack this. Okay, I'm just going to tack this down, and I'm going to knot off. I'm going to cut off my thread. All right, I've rethreaded my needle. Wasn't that fast? I'm going to tie another knot. And then when I start, I'm just going to start just like I did over here. I'm going to come out just on the inside. Here we go. Just on the inside of that last stitch. And I'm going to continue on as normal. I'm going to go down in the center hole. Come back up on the circumference. Put this behind. And there I go all the way around. Now, I'm actually going to tack this down because I want to show you how to finish this when you get to the end. Okay, so I've completed my eke stitch, my wheel stitch, and you can see this is where I started right here. I've got one stitch left. I'm going to continue as normal. I came out on the circumference. I'm going to go in through the same hole. I'm going to come out here. Okay. There's my last stitch. And now what I want to do, because I've got a little gap here, is I just want to go underneath that final stitch so that they're connected. And then I'm going to do that little tack. I'm just going to go down here. Okay. And then knot that off. Real quick, I am going to knot this off, and I just want to show you how to get started on the open circle so that you're sure to know how to do that if you want to try that method. So, quick tie a knot here. Okay, and I'm actually going to draw this over here because it's a little hard to work so close to the frame of your hoop. So here's a little one. And there's my inner circle. Okay, same method where I want to always come up on the circumference and go down in the center. So I'm going to pick a spot. Here we go. And I'm going to go down. So this one, it definitely helps if you want to draw, at least until you get the hang of it, where you want your spokes to be. But you don't have to. I'm going to come over here to this next one. Do this. And then again, instead of coming in the center, I'm just going to go down to that next line. Put that thread behind. So we haven't done a lot of rounded edge stitches in this class because we've been doing fill stitches. When you work with line stitches or outline stitches, if you're working on a curve, the only thing we've done is that the paso atrás and the other one, whose name I'm forgetting right now. What was it? I'm looking. The zoom stitch or the cord stitch. So with those, we did a line. And you can see here, because I did my spoke so wide that I'm getting like, it's sort of pixelated. It's like square edges. Whenever you're working on a curve, the smaller stitches are better for getting a line that's curved in appearance. So really, probably spokes that are at least half the distance I chose would be better visually to get a nice round edge. And on the center, out on the circumference, thread goes behind, and pull. Yeah, you can see already that's getting a much smoother line than this. But again, that could be the look you're going for. All right, I'm going to go ahead and cut this off, and then we'll move on to our final stitch. There's one thing. No, I'm going to save that. Move on to that final stitch. Okay, so this last one that we're going to do is the French knot. Again, French knot, not traditional Mexican stitch, although I'm sure, absolutely sure, that Mexican embroiderers use it all the time. Maybe it has a different name. But it's great for making dots. It's great. You're going to see it a lot in flower embroidery. This, if I had finished this flower, I might fill this center with French knots. For our purposes, I thought it might be nice to put an eyeball on your bird or on your butterfly or maybe the doorknob on your house. Or I love to add just little polka dots with it. It's just a really fun little stitch. It also adds a really nice raised texture on a piece. So it just adds an extra element that way. So I don't even need to draw anything because I'm just making a dot. So what I'm going to do for the French knot is I'm going to come up from the bottom. I've tied a knot in my thread. I'm using a single strand of thread. This is why you want to keep your back clean. Look, that jumped way over there and came up with my French knot. I'm just going to trim that out of my way, and I'm going to trim that out of my way. Okay. So again, single thread. I've got my tail over here. I would actually really not recommend that you try this with a double thread with a knot in the back until you're quite practiced at it, because it's like I mentioned the first time we used a double thread, it's pretty tricky to get it out if you mess up. And I promise you're going to mess up some French knots in your time because they're finicky, but well worth the effort. So I've come up from the bottom, I checked my knot. Now this is a two-handed stitch. So I'm right-handed. So in my left hand, I'm going to hold the thread that's coming out of the fabric. In my right hand, I have my needle. I am going to put my needle over the top of the fabric, and I'm going to wrap. We're going to start with 2 wraps. I'm going to wrap my thread twice around my needle. Notice that I'm pretty close to the end of my needle here. Okay. Now I've got this wrapped and I'm pulling this tight. I'm not like pulling it so tight that if I was pulling my hair, it would hurt. I'm pulling it tight where it's not going to slip off. Now I'm going to put the end of my needle back in right next to where I came out, or in the same hole. My left hand, I'm pulling this taut, but again, I'm not yanking it. I'm just pulling it taut. Now I'm going to push my needle through the fabric. If you have a wide a needle with a big eye, it's going to be a little bit harder to push this through. So that's where you're going to have to be real careful about your tension, where you're pulling it, but not really, really pulling it too tight. So I'm going to push this through. Once the eye of my needle is pretty much through there, I can let go. Okay, I'm back to a one-handed stitch, and I'm going to gently pull my needle through the fabric. Okay, and now I have this lovely little, I don't know if you can see how raised it is there, but it makes this nice little dot, and a bunch of them all together are so pretty. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to come up over here. Okay. Needles over the fabric. I'm going to wrap this 1, 2. Let's try this 3 times. Okay. I'm going to go back in the fabric, pulling this taut but not tight. All right. My eye is still above the fabric, but it's pretty much inside the knot, so I can let go. And now I'm going to pull this through. Nice little dot. You can try this with as many wraps as you want. I would say 3 or 4 is going to get you a nice dot. Once you get past that, it starts to get a little tricky. And once you get really past that, it becomes a different stitch. So one more time, just because. Here we go. Wrap it. 1, 2, 3. Back down, pulling. Push this in until the eye's in there. Now I can let go. Gently pull this through. You might have to, sometimes you have to like really wiggle this if you've got that big eye, but that's okay. There you go. French knots. That's that. Okay, the other one thing that I had started to mention and then changed my mind. I'm not going to go over this stitch because I went over it in the starter video. This is the back stitch if you're an embroiderer. It's called the Ikamail stitch. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. My apologies. but it is what we know as the back stitch, and it is used in this embroidery where we learned our Nikta star last time. They will outline that in the back stitch or the Ikmael stitch. Okay, so if this isn't a stitch that you know, go back and watch that starter video. I know most of you that have done embroidery will know this stitch already. So if you want to add that to your Nikta stars from last time, that would be a traditional method to use. So that is it for this last Mexican embroidery class, and we will start next time with some more fill stitches that I'm pretty excited about. I'm just loving these fill stitches, so that's what we're going to do. Have a great night.